Let us settle our prayers. All of it together. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranadosmi abahu purushakaram shankachakra siddharinam Sahasra shirasam shvetam pranamami patanjalim Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Harihi Om. Obviously, Sridhar is out of station. So, we were dealing with that sutra of dhyana, of which I gave you some information. I don't want to proceed further in his absence. So, we'll proceed when he comes. However, about meditation and dhyana, I want to share with you furthermore some inputs. If you recall, I said that dhyana is not meditation. However, meditation is an aspect of dhyana. Dhyana is a wider concept, if you recall. You can be doing dhyana without meditativity, because everyone is not qualified for meditativity. Everybody is not endowed with that aspect. However, dhyana is a kind of nitya karma. Everyone must do dhyana. So there is no question of qualification. If you are not qualified, there are procedures, there are processes to embark upon dhyana. It really doesn't need any qualification. If you are a human being, you should carry it out. Whereas for meditativity, it's a higher faculty function. Now, everyone has not actualized that. There are few people who have actualized higher faculty functions. That's why we call them higher. But meditativity is aspect of dhyana. If dhyana can be done meditatively, that is called dhyanatmakata. Dhyana every must do. But everyone may not be able to do with dhyanatmakata, that is meditativity. So that means there is meditation with meditativity and there is meditation without meditativity if you equate meditation to dhyana. Now that's the problem in English. They cannot say there is meditation without meditativity, because their concept of meditation is limited. Concept of dhyana is wider. So Yatha Abhimata Dhyanadva was the sutra that we were considering. Now dhyana will always pertain to something about you know. Meditation also pertains to something that you know. You can't be meditating on an unknown realm of knowledge, because meditation is a higher aspect of brain function. So if you have no knowledge about something, you can't be meditating. You can only be having conjectures, inferences, and not meditativity. Meditativity requires kind of crystallized knowledge. When the knowledge is not crystallized, you can't be meditating on it. If you have doubts, if you have apprehensions, if the conjectures are there, maybe this, maybe that, may not be this, may not be that, you can't be meditative in such realm. So it should be something known to you. Something known to you means what? It is in the realm of the past. Your knowledge, the knowledge that you already have, that means it is knowledge that you have attained, you have acquired, you have gained, and not yet to be gained, not yet to be acquired. That's why one of the connotations, meaning for dhyana is memory. Nama smaranam, smaranam dhyanam. So it is a kind of memory. You can be imagining something which has happened in the past. You can recall it and imagine, and you can be having meditativity. You can't have imagination about something unknown, yet to come, not actualized at all. You can't be meditating on it. You can imagine something. You can imagine what will happen in 3000 AD. You can imagine what can happen 3000 AD. We are now 2019. So that imagination is also possible. So imagination is of the futuristic realm, and imagination can be of the realm of the past. So there are two kinds of imaginations. Now here meditation will always be pertaining to something that you already have acquired, you already have it, you already know it, and not something yet to know. That means meditation has something to do with the past. Now, problem with the modern era people is that we are often told, don't turn to past. Be in present. Or project in the future. Look for future. Don't go to past. Now, don't go to past. Such advice, you know what is implied there? When somebody advises you, don't think of past, don't go to past. What is implied there? That means it is not a sweet, pleasurable past. It's a bitter past. And therefore you are told, don't go to past. It's not an absolute advice. If you have good memories, sweet memories, good conditions, one cannot advise, don't go to past. Do you follow? If you had wonderful time sometimes in the past, it is not wrong, and it is not proper advice to say don't turn to past, don't go to past. Only if you are overindulging in it, then somebody might say don't go to past. But your life requires some relish. And if you don't have delight and happiness now, you can certainly take delight and happiness from retrospective. The past, just enough. If you go indiscreetly in it, then it's a crazy condition, and somebody will advise, please don't go to past. That means don't go so much. Don't go so much in recalling your past glory, past delights, past happiness. Because that will be fanciful. If you go overboard, it will be fanciful. And therefore, discreetly, you can certainly go to the past. Basically, meditation is to go to past, and now in modern era, we have the advice, don't go to past. Be in present, or you can go to future, but don't go to past. When you go to future, again there is some discretion. You can't be indiscreetly going to future. There is some discretion. Within that framework, you can go to future. You can think about what will I do this evening, what will I do tomorrow. You can't, what will I do on the same day in 2028. You can't go that far. Do you follow? What will I do on the same day in 2028? This will be crazy thinking, crazy imaginations. Again, there is a discretion in going to future. To go to which future and not to go to which future. How much to go to future and how much not to go to future. So same is the case with the past. Which past to go and which past not to go. how far past to go, how far past not to go. Discretion is important. However, meditation is going to past. Meditation is always taking recourse to past. You can't take recourse to present and have meditation. You can't take recourse to future and go for meditation. So, that's why memory always is a structure on your memories. Meditation, dhyana is, in that case, is always a structure on your memory. If you have no memory of the past, you can't be having meditation at all. For some reason, suppose all past is totally deleted, then there is no scope to go to meditation at all. Because all the known realm is wiped out. If all known realm is wiped out, your brain cannot have a higher faculty function. So understand memory, how important is memory for meditation and meditativity. So, past. Memory is going to past. Now, neurologically, the back of the brain is described as old brain. The back of the brain is described as old brain. The front of the brain is called the future brain. Now, as you are sitting, try to have a thought on what you might be doing tomorrow. Your awareness mind will dash on the front of the brain. What will I do tomorrow? It's a projection. So your awareness will come to the front of the brain. On the other hand, if you try to imagine or think, what did I do last Sunday? Your awareness dashes the back brain. It goes towards the back. So you can try this. What was I doing last Sunday? Where were I last month? What did I do last month? What significant thing I did last month? Which is memory. And then your awareness will go towards the back. The browsing will take place in the back of the brain, towards the back side. So even from your eyes, you can try this anytime, even now as you are hearing me. Awareness from the eyes will go back. Awareness from the nose will go back. Awareness from the ears will go back. Awareness from the face will go back. The moment you try to peep into the past, do some browsing of the past. On the other hand, if you think of tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, it will dash onto the front. Awareness will come to the front. So that's the future and this is the past. Future thought process, that means it is forward movement of the awareness in the brain. And thought process, in the realm of the past, it is backward movement of your awareness, reverse gear. So future is forward gear and past is reverse gear in your awareness. So for meditation, take this it's a technical clue. When you are going to sit for meditation, try to have abstraction in your eyes, abstraction in your brain, and see that the movement is going towards the back of the brain, hind brain. So you will get the twilight condition of meditativity. If you bring the awareness to the front of the brain, then it will be twilight condition of future. Imagination, foresight, thinking prospectively, so awareness will be in a forward gear. So if you divide the brain in two halves, the front half and the back half, the front half is for future and the back half is for past. So technical clue here for meditation and dhyana, meditation, meditativity is to closing the eyes and draw your awareness backwards. Exhale backwards, towards the back lobe of the brain. Stem brain, root of the brain, the neck, the back, the spine, the posterior. Even now when you take your mind to the back, rather than being more aware of me, if you start becoming aware of your own back, your own spine, what happens? So the posterior body has something to do with the meditativity, not the anterior. That's why the back brain is called past brain. Then in esoteric anatomy, the description occurs in our text of the lore. The band of the senses, see, it is one band, mid-band. Eyes, nose, ear and skin, of course. So this is called present. If you are seeing, if you are hearing, if you are smelling, you are in present. If it is a sensory act, high definition sensory act, you are in present. So your awareness is in the mid band of your head, brain, face, skull. Mid band. So for present, you must be here. If you close this, you will not be in present. So seeing, I am seeing, I am hearing, I am smelling, it is from the sensory band. And senses are located in the mid part. Above the senses is the past. That is why the Oriental people, Eastern people are in the habit of, if they say, oh, that is my destiny, they say, that is my destiny. They don't say, that is my destiny, that is my destiny, that is my destiny. This is not destiny. They say here, destiny, lalat patala. Now what is destiny constituted by what? By your past, not by your future, not by your present. Destiny is constituted by the past. And that is why this is called Lalata Patala. It is an archives of all your past deeds, not only in this life, throughout your existence so far. You might be through various life species. You could have been ant, elephant, rhinoceros, dinosaurus, rhino, eagle, bird, crow, human beings, whatever, celestial being, infernal beings. It is all in the realm of the past. So it is all registered here. That is why we say, what a fate. So we point out at this. So physically it is called forehead. But inside it is all archives of the past. And that's why that is the realm of the past. This is the realm of the future. You speak. You think, what will I do tomorrow? Now, this is not just a thought. It is a potential karma. What will I do tomorrow? What will I do henceforth, hereafter? So that's a potential act. It is yet to take place. So that's your organ of speech. I resolve, I will be doing this next year. I'll resolve, I will be doing this tomorrow. I decide I will be doing this tomorrow. It's a resolution. Resolution comes from your speech. So when you are resolute, you should be clear about what is that resolution. You can't be unclear. I am unresolute. Without resolution for my resolution is not possible. You should be resolute, decided. I am going to do this. I am going to do that. That's the organ of speech. It's called Madhyamavani. In English, you don't have this classification. but it's called Madhyama Vani. Mental speech which is clear articulation. You are clear about when you are thinking, what will I do tomorrow, what will I do next year, what will I do next decade, etc. You are clear about the letters, the words, and not ambiguous. The conspicuity of your thought is given by your speech, silent speech. Mind is not qualified for conspicuity because the mind is rambling, wandering, it is quicksilver-like, so it will not be articulate, it won't be conspicuous. Because the mind is like wind. So it is not the mind which resolves, it is the speech which resolves. Silent speech resolves. So for this difference in silent speech and mind, look into that book, Yogasana book, where I have described Vachika Kriya. How Vachika Kriya is different than mind. When you are crystal clear kind of thought process, it is a speech that you have. Silently you speak. Mind is nothing but chaos of all thoughts. So, in psychology and in layman psychology, you say the mind should resolve. Mind really doesn't resolve. Your speech and mind together, when they come together in their proper kind of joint venture, you can resolve. You can't be not clear in your resolutions. You cannot be ambiguous in resolutions. You have to be conspicuous in resolutions. Conspicuity is given by the speech. It's a joint venture of the mind and speech together, and the speech is taking a lead role. Mind is a supportive entity. You all make resolutions at the end of the year for 1st of January, is that right? Are you ambiguous about resolutions? If you are ambiguous, it's not resolution. It must be conspicuous. So for the conspicuity comes by your silent speech. From 1st of January, I am going to practice yoga regularly. It is the silent speech which must utter this conspicuously and make a resolution. It is a speech supported by back which makes resolution. The primary force is speech because it gives you conspicuity, and the mind is there to support it. It is not the mind which resolves actually. It is the speech which resolves. That's called Madhyama speech. Now, there is no word for that in English. We have 4 speeches: Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari. These are 4 layers of speeches according to Oriental wisdom, Adhyatma and Yoga. So it is Madhyama Vani. Para, the deepest. Pashyanti, above it. And then Madhyama, further above it. And then Vaikhari. So this is Vaikhari. Your oration, Vaikhari. This is the band. Mouth band is Vaikhari. Then comes below it is Madhyama. Madhyama is here. So this is actually important thought locus. We think brain is a thought locus. The thought is always with words, language, expression. You can't have a thought which is without a language. Can you have a thought? A thought without language, is it possible? A thought without syntax, is it possible? There must be verb, noun, predicate, a statement must be there. So thought is based on language. Language is based on statements. The thought is based on statements. It is in statement form. You can't have thought without a statement form. Then it's a chaos. It's a turbulence. Now, any statement is composed of words, and any word is composed of letters. Can you have a word without any letter, literal letter? You can't have any word without literal letter. You can't have a sentence without words. Is that right? You can't have a sentence, statement, syntax without words. So see how that is constituted. And statement or statements constitute a thought. A statement or statements constitute a thought. So if you open out the factors of your thought, it will be invariably having a language, not a language-less thought. If you are British, English. If you are Indian, your language. If you are Spanish, Spanish thought. So language will be there, and the language is made up of words. Words are made up of letters, and letters have vowels. The words have vowels. Can you utter a word which has no vowel at all? CHTKM spelling. Utter it. CHTKM. Will you utter the word? You won't utter the word. Is that right? So word must have a vowel. If you open out the factor, you can't have a word without a vowel at all. There must be at least one vowel in a word. Without vowel, there is no word. What are vowels? In English language, you have those vowels. In phonetics, the vowels are a, I, U, A, I, O, Au, Aha. Phonetically. Do you follow? Otherwise, in English, you say A, E, U, etc. are vowels. Those are literal letters. But phonetically, a, I, U, these are called vowels, what we call as varna. So there must be a, I, U, A, I, E, any of the word that you are able to utter. If there is no vowel, you can't utter the word. Where are the vowels? According to esoteric physiology, they are in Vishuddhi Chakra. Vishuddhi Chakra is here. So that's why this is a very important thought locus. That's why those who have seen Guruji, somebody introduces a patient who is depressed, etc., imbalance in mind, some mental problem, hypertensed, he would look at the throat. He would say that your throat is active, throat is relaxed, hyper condition, like hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism, etc., which is in the throat region. So this is the thought locus, because all the vowels are in Vishuddhi Chakra. If you look into chakras. Secondly, this is such an important junction. How? We have PNS, CNS, ANS. You know about it? Central nervous system, autonomous nervous system, peripheral nervous system. Now the spine is peripheral nervous system. And it's called cerebrospinal tract. The brain and spine are one body. They are one body. Cerebrospinal tract. Cerebral, brain, spinal tract. So it is one body. There is no division between the head part and spine. The spine comes from stem brain. The stem brain is the end of the top of the spine there. So the impulses are going from PNS, spinal, to brain, and brain to spine. So there's a traffic going in the spine, but from the spine to brain, brain to spine, which goes through the throat. Okay. So signals will come from here to and will go to spine. Signals will come from spine and go up. So there is a two-way traffic going on in this track, and throat comes in there. Okay. Then you know that your left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. Right side brain, left side of the body. Is that right? So the left side of the brain, right side of the body. Right side of the brain, left side of the body. Where do they crisscross? Here. So traffic across from one side of the brain to opposite side of the brain, and traffic across from this pair. This is the junction. So traffic this way comes here. Traffic this way, look here, comes here. Traffic this way meets here. Traffic this way, up and down and up, meet here. So this is like a square, a chowk. You know the Tilak Chowk in Pune? How many roads are there? Lakdi Pool, Lakshmi, Tilak Road, Lakshmi Road, what's the middle one? Kumtekar Road, and on this side you have Kelkar Road. So Kelkar Road, Lakshmi Road, Kumtekar Road, Tilak Road, and Lakdi Pool, and then onward little Shastri Road. That's why it is called Tilak Square. In Mumbai you have got Satchauki, 7 roads, somewhere near Ghatkopar. 7 roads, main roads coming there. So can you imagine what must be the traffic problem? If 7 main roads are coming to one junction. So this is very busy traffic junction. 24/7 the traffic is going on in all the ways. Do you follow? 24/7 traffic is going on. Impulses are going back and forward, etc., etc. This is a very important, very busy junction of all neurological impulses. Now, can you banish any neurology from your thought process? Whole neurology in comatic state. You have thought process. Is it possible? So understand relationship between the thought process and neurological impulses. Neurological impulses, neurological triggering, neurological functions, vibrations, pulsations. That's why this is a very busy junction. Moreover, all the vowels are also here. It's an important organ for oration, either express or silent. The throat is very, very active organ. Your body may not be active. Now all of your body is not active, but your mind is active. Is that right? If the mind is active, that means words and the factors thereof. So vowels there. Every consonant is again vowelized. It's not two classes, vowels and consonants. A pure consonant you cannot really utter. That's called half consonant. You can't utter. A consonant must be attached with a vowel. Then you can utter, such as k, k. पाय मोडलेला क उच्चारता येत नाही. You can't utter half k. If you have to utter the half k, it has to come in a word. एखाद्या शब्दामध्ये अर्धाक्षर you can utter it, but just half letter you can't utter it. Conjunction, there are half letters. Conjung, there is half letter. Kshan, there is a half letter. Now you can't utter half letter without the whole word. So the consonants are vowelized for them to be utter worthy. If you don't attach a Vowel to a consonant you can't utter. You can't utter k, kh, g, g, ng without a vowel. So k, kh, g, g, ng, is the vowel. Ka, kha, ga, ga, nga, a is the vowel. Ki, khi, gi, gi, e is the vowel. So without vowel integrated with it, integral to it, you cannot utter. It's not oration worthy. So understand, even the consonants, they have got to do something here. Because no consonant is without attachment of vowel. Therefore, whether consonants or whether vowels, this is a pulsating aspect in your thought, in your speech. That's why this is an enormous locus for attention, thought chaotism. That's why it is locus of thought. So, that's why from here below it is called future. Your thought is a seed of your future. As you think, so you reap. You have heard this. So the thought is a seed of your future acts. If there is no thought, there will be no future act. And that is below mouth. So, this is the future band. This is the present band and this is the past band. Okay? Now you came across the present. This is, I said, present. It's not absolute present. Because I told you about the future brain and past brain. A question was posed to me, where is the present brain? Does this question come to your mind as well? If I say half of the brain, or the front half is future and back half is past, both halves are consumed by past and future. Now nothing is left. Where is the future brain? Present brain. Where is the present brain? Brain spinning? Again, there is nothing for the brain to spin. The brain is already consumed by future or past. Where is the brain left out? Therefore, metaphysics gives you a solution here. There is nothing like present. There is nothing like pure, exclusive present. Your present moment will be always having a bogey of past. Bogies of past or bogies of future. If you sand the past and future, there is no present. The present is between the future and between the future and past. Now tell me, what is the duration of present? What is the duration of present? Can you spell out? Can you say that this is the duration of present? But about the past and future you can say, yes, this is 10 days old, this is 1 month old, this is 10 days back, 1 year back, 10 years back, this is 1 year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, 100 years later, 1000 years later. This is the span which is expandable. But what about the present? What is the duration of present? Does it have duration or no duration? If we believe that there is a present, and if we say that it is not fictitious, it is not non-existent, then we have to allocate some duration for present. Not allocating a duration for present, you can't have present as a valid entity. Is that right? What's the duration of the present? Duration of the present is 1 moment. Duration of the present is 1 moment, precisely. What is 1 moment? The moment is defined by metaphysics. Definition of moment in metaphysics is that infinitesimally finite unit of time. Infinitesimally finite unit of time is a moment. This is technical definition. What does it mean? It is indivisible unit of time. It is indivisible unit of time. Say time units such as hour. Is it indivisible? No. It can be divided by 60 minutes. Is that right? So you can divide 1 hour. 60 pieces, parts of it you will say, then it makes 1 hour. Divisible unit of time. A minute. Is it indivisible unit of time? No. It can be divided. It can be divided into seconds. 60 seconds is 1 minute. Coming to second, is it indivisible unit of time? No, it can be divided by microseconds. So some of you have having your stopwatch timer in your cell phones. So after 10, after 100 you get 1 second. It goes so fast. 1 to 100, 1 second. 1 to 100, 1 second. Or 1 to 10, 1 second. 1 to 10, 1 second. So there are 10 parts of second. There are 100 parts of second. There can be 1,000 parts of second if you take a recourse to technology. 1,000th of a second, 1 billionth of a second, 1 billionth of a second, 1 trillionth of a second. This is not a fantasy. It is there in science. That means second can be divided. Is that right? Maybe you will go to nanoseconds. Ultra modern science. So nanosecond also can be divided, divisible. Then come to that part of unit of time which cannot be further divided. There cannot be 1/2 of a moment. There can be 1/10, not 1/10 of a moment, 1/100th of a moment, 1/1000th of a moment. Impossible. Moment is indivisible unit of time. That is infinitesimally finite unit of time in the language of science. So what is the duration of that? That's the duration of moment. Now it is humanly impossible to be in a moment. You will be having collocation of moments running into billions and trillions and quadrillions and pentallions and sectillions and septillions and octillions and novtillions and decillions. Can you catch it? You can't catch a moment. It is so fine, it is so subtle that you cannot be catching it. There will be always a collocation of moments, several moments. Therefore, you cannot be catching a moment, therefore you cannot be in a moment. Therefore, you cannot be in a present. Again, the metaphysics defines this concept of our time. What is our concept of time? The concept of time has nothing to do with metaphysical time. What is concept of time? This concept of time is derived, it's a gravity. The chronological time that we are in it, this is the chronological time. This chronological time is not a time. It is a gravity. What is this gravity? Earth has an axial rotation. When it completes one axial rotation, we say it is 1 day. And then we say that is 24 hours. And then 24 hours is 1 day, and then 365 days is 1 year. Now what is that 1 year? It is the orbital rotation by the earth to the sun. It's an orbital rotation. So axial rotation and orbital rotation are the basis for our chronological time. So we are referring to gravities because these rotations are gravities. Axial rotation velocity, which is said to be 1000 miles per hour. The axial rotation, the earth is going round at a velocity at the equator of it at 1000 miles per hour. That's why 24,000 miles it completes. That is the circumference of the earth at the equator. This is geography. Okay. What is it? It is gravity. If the gravity of the earth is modulated, modified, rather than taking the 24 hours, it might take 28 hours or 22 hours in case of variation. Now, if suppose something happens to the earth and from sometimes onwards it starts completing one orbit in 20 hours, our day will be of 20 hours. For any reason, it takes longer time, and then it becomes 30 hours for one axial rotation. Your day will be 30 hours day. So this is the gravity to which we are referring to. The gravity will modify the velocity of the earth and velocity of the earth to go around the sun, etc. Orbital rotation, axial rotation is because of the gravity, according to physics. The gravity changes, the velocity will change. So as I said, the earth is going axial rotation at 1000 miles per hour because 24,000 miles is the circumference of the equator. What about its orbital rotation? Which earth going around the sun? You know what is its velocity? It's a mind-boggling velocity with which earth is going round the sun. It is going at the speed of 550,000 miles per hour. 550,000 miles per 5.5 lakhs. 550,000 miles per hour. Such a huge globe is galloping to complete one orbit around the sun. Imagine what must be this velocity. Imagine the size of the globe, 7,000 odd miles of radius, 24,000 miles of circumference, such a huge ball going at the velocity of 550,000 miles per hour to complete one orbit. You know how many orbits we have completed so far? You know, we are 450 million years old. Earth is 450 million years old. It has hardly done 18 orbits so far. Around the sun. I say around the earth, around the sun, around the center of the earth. Now you can understand what is the distance the earth makes when it makes in 365 days at the speed of 550,000 miles and calculate back home. That distance it covers in 1 year. You decide to travel that much in your life, 1 year, you will not be able to travel unless you take that speed of 550,000 miles. So today's even rockets are not going more than 35,000 miles. The spaceships are not going beyond 35,000 miles per hour. Yet we have to develop technology to make it 100,000 miles per hour, and then 500,000 miles per hour, and then 550,000 miles per hour. The earth along with the sun along with the earth is going round the galactic center, which has only completed 18 orbits. So earth is moving around the sun along with earth, along with the entire solar system is going around the galactic center, and it has only completed 18 orbits so far. What must be the size of galaxy? Imagine. Anyway, these are all gravities. All these star movements, planetary movements, these are all gravities. Any less and more in gravity, the velocities are going to change. That means we are referring to chronological time, which is nothing but gravity. We don't refer to actual time at all. So there is something called as chronological time, something called as psychological time, and something called as real time, actual time, metaphysical time. So these are three concepts that you have to understand. What is psychological time? You know, when the time goes on well, the time goes quicker. When the time is not good and it's a bad, boring, suppose Prashant is boring you, then it takes longer time. Longer and longer time. 1 hour seems to be like 3 hours. But if you are with your beloved, 1 hour seems to be like 10 minutes. Is that right? Psychological time. The point is, metaphysical time is it is a moment. And actually, note the time as such really doesn't exist. That's why it is all Maya, according to philosophy. Time really doesn't exist for us. Why? Because the succession of moments gives you a second, a minute, an hour. Is that right? Succession of moments gives you a time span. Now, how is the succession? Moment comes, moment goes, moment comes, moment goes. That means suppose I draw a line from left to right and simultaneously I have a duster and go on effacing it. I do the endeavor for 1 hour. How long line will I get it? If I draw the line for 1 hour, which is being effaced simultaneously from behind, I will not get a line at all. Is that right? So the moments are coming and going. So you can't have a bogey of moments, because the moment goes into latency. Moment gone cannot be part of bogey of time. Moment comes and goes. Moment exists for a moment. If every moment exists for a moment, you can't have continuum of time. Are you getting it? If the moment goes in a moment doesn't stay for longer than a moment, then there is no continuum, there is no flow of time. If there is no flow of time, you can't get a second. If there is no flow of time, you can't get a minute, you can't get an hour. There must be flow of time. So this is a, what you call, Maya, concept of time. That this is Sunday, this is around 10 o'clock. All this is not really true. There is nothing like 10 o'clock. It is 10 o'clock only here. If you longitudinally go to some other zone, it is not 10 o'clock, somewhere it is 11 o'clock, somewhere 12 o'clock, somewhere it is 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, on either sides. If you go to outer space, there is no directions. Do you know this? You have direction here, east, west, north, south. But if you go to outer space, there are no directions. There is no time. Because you have escaped the gravities. So as long as you are escaped from gravities or not in gravities, then you are not in this time. That's why you escape the gravity of the earth and go out in outer space. So in outer space, at this moment, there is no Sunday. There can be no day. There can be no day there. There can be no month. There can be no year. It's not 2019 once you are out in outer space. 2019 is a terrestrial condition. It's only on the earth. There is no 2019 on Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and Mercury. It's not 2019 there. Is that right? It's only here. So this is all fictitious, imaginary. Though this is an imagination. Our chronological time is all imagination. So you can't really get this kind of, even therefore, all this so-called past, present, future is, if you refer it to time on time reference, time scale, they are not existent. So this time is a mysterious concept. I won't further spin your brain on it. Today it should be enough of spinning. But just try to think, what is this metaphysical concept of time. So there is no present as such. We can never be in present. Not being in past, not being in future doesn't mean you are in present. It's only not being in past. That's how it should be expressed. Not being in future, that's how it should be expressed. Not being in past, it doesn't mean you are in present. Not being in future, it doesn't mean you are present. Because the present is actually non-existent. It's just a moment. You can't catch a moment. Humanly impossible to catch hold of moment. If you catch hold, they cannot hold it. Because it doesn't last more than a moment. So, this concept of metaphysical time is so important when it comes to philosophical systems. Patanjali has defined it. He has dealt with moment. So, therefore, there is nothing like present. Present is only the threshold of the past and the other side, and immediately comes the realm of the future. So there is always a bogey of future or past when you are in present. It is very difficult. It's a transcendent state. You must be in a timeless condition, spaceless condition, then only you will be transcending the time that is past and future, which are existent. Present is non-existent. So there are parasites. Past and future are parasites. You will always get past and future if you try to catch hold of present. It cannot be exclusive present. There will be something attached to it, a parasite, either of the past or either of the future. So therefore there is no present brain. Do you follow? Reality is past and future. Present is actuality. So don't confuse between reality and actuality. The present is actual. And this lasts only for one moment precisely. It will go into oblivion, it will go into latency in just that moment. After that moment, it doesn't stay with you. And therefore there is no part of the brain which is present brain. It cannot be holding it. Humanly impossible. Anyway, therefore meditation is to take recourse to past. Now which past to take recourse is an important question to be considered. If you go to your sad past, your mind will be spoiled. If you go to sweet past, if your mind is depressed, it will come to normal. So it is worth taking recourse to that. So that's why when we are sad, many times, if you recall last time I said, with the sadness, if you want to overcome it, go to good memory of the past. So you can be sad without being sad. You can be happy without being happy. There is no happiness actually, but you can be happy. By either mind to the future or mind to the past. Send the mind to future, a good future, dreamy future, heavenly future. There is no actual happiness, but you will be happy. Or send the mind to back, the past, good past, sweet past. Actually you are not happy, but then you will be happy. Actually you are sad, but you can be happy. Actually you are happy, you can be sad. So now you don't have any such thing. Now recall of any sad event in your past life. Immediately your mind will be spoiled. Actuality and reality. So present is only actuality. Actuality is vulnerable to go to latency. In one moment it will go to latency. Even the material world, nothing is static. That's why it is called fleeting flux. Every moment any object such as this is going to oldness. This is traveling towards oldness. This is not traveling towards newness. That's why it will go to oldness and will go to latency. So every moment this is going towards its death. Moment we take birth, we commence our journey towards death. The moment we take birth, we commence our journey towards the death. So, latency, actuality and potentiality. Understand these three entities. Potentiality, yet to come. Actuality, as it is now. And then latency. So actuality doesn't stay for more than a moment. It is going to oldness. And oldness will slowly, it will be journey towards oblivion. Journey towards the old is journey into oblivion. Extinction. Latency. So that's why these metaphysical realities must be construed. Then the life will have different track. Do you follow? We are totally neglecting that and we are trying to have our life on a track. So therefore the meditation is to take recourse to sampath. That means meditativity. So that is a technical process. Take it towards the back of the brain because you have to take recourse to the back, the past, the retrospective realm of your thought and knowledge. That's why meditativity is always on ripe knowledge. Ripe knowledge means with the knowledge which is knowledge of the past. I knew this, now I can meditate on it. I do not know this, I just now I have come to know it, I can't meditate on it. Because there will be lots of conjectures, inferences, lots of pros and cons in thoughts, back and forth movements of the thought. So you can't be averse of past if you want to go for meditativity. This is the what you call as the contradiction. On one hand they say modern thought process, don't go to past. And on the other hand, for lifestyle you must have meditation. You must meditate. That means you have to something draw from the past. On one hand you don't allow to go there, on the other hand you say draw from it. This is the contradiction in modern thought process. For lifestyle, they will advocate meditation. For enriching the life, they will say meditation. On the other hand, they will say don't go to past. That's the contradiction. So meditativity has a technology which yoga gives. Pratyahara. The inwardliness of the mind, what is called as the inwardliness and infacedness of the mind, antarmukhi. So that means antarmukh means you are going towards something of the past. If you are going to the future, it is bahirmukhi. Future, if you are going to future, it is bahirmukhi, opposite, outwardliness. So yoga will tell you about technology for inwardliness, infacedness, and that's for the meditativity, and that's the back of the brain, taking support of the back of the brain, coming to the gravity of the back of the brain, rather than being in the gravity of the front of the brain. So, little more information about input about dhyana, meditation, meditativity. How we came to the concept of time, which is metaphysical concept of time. It is so important to be having some sort of divergence about the concept of time, metaphysical, to be formally going for knowing meditation, meditativity. Informally, there are so many ways. Drugs are there. Psychedelic drugs. You go into seventh heaven. So there are other means. There are neurological processes. The neurology can be stimulated for you to go to ecstasy. So something can be with the electrodes triggered in the brain, and you will go into that bliss, transcendent state. So that is neurotechnology. With the neurotechnology, you can have meditativity, not meditation. If your ecstatic center is triggered, you have such a state. In neurology, there is a center in the brain called ecstatic center. If that ecstatic center is triggered by electrodes, you will be in that bliss. So much so that you will forget to eat food. Days might pass. You will be starving and starving and starving, and you know the result of that. If you are starving for days together, what will happen biologically? But then you will be in bliss, and you will like to stay there. This experiment was carried out in neurology sometimes back. They caught hold of a mouse and caught hold of the ecstatic center in the brain, and they went on stimulating it. The mouse did not eat anything. They had kept so many things around it to eat, never put its mouth there. It went on fasting and until death. They did not stop stimulating the ecstatic center for the mouse. Ultimately, the mouse died in consuming ecstasy. Everything was set aside because of ecstasy. That was triggered all the time. It was stimulated, and therefore it did not bother about taking water, taking food. And then days and days and days, ultimately it died. So this what ecstatic center can do. So in meditation we take recourse to something that is a natural process and not such neurological technique or drugs. Drugs can take you. I know what happens to a drug addict, what happens to the health condition of a drug addict. It's not just the drug is spoiling. He doesn't take other things that he should be taking all the time. Taking that, not taking any food and nutrition. That's the important factor. It's not that is necessarily toxic and it is killing his body. Basically, it doesn't go for all needs, biological needs. They are kept at bay. So, yoga tells you about some technology of meditation, how the brain is, how the system is, how the mind psyche is, and how to devise technology. So, meditativity technology is given. So, that's one aspect of dhyana. Meditative dhyana is one kind of dhyana. There are non-meditative dhyanas where your mind is vexed, as I said last time. Mind is tormented, yet you are in dhyana. You say Ram, 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 panicky. That's also dhyana. Japor dhyanam. Japam is dhyana. Taking counseling and having a transcendent thought process is also dhyana. One of the basic factor of dhyana is, suppose you are hearing a noble, sublime gospel, nectarine speech by a sagely person. What happens to you is that you forget your I, pronoun I. So a thought process which will keep the I, pronoun I aside, that's a meditation. That is dhyana. If you are with your I and the turbulence of the I, the hubbub of the I, then you will be non-meditative. That's why we all try to. If you want to find a bliss, it is to be found by getting away from you. You must get away from you. If you are with you, then you will not be transcending the time and space. So sometimes when you are in ecstasy, say in music or any other art form, beauty of the nature, it's not that you are close to the beauty, you are close to the sublime, you are away from your I. Pronoun I, that's the important thing. Pronoun I is a major antagonizer to be depriving you of essential bliss. You can get pseudo bliss. Those in superiority complex, don't they get a lot of, you say, ego, my ego was nourished. I can pamper you, I can praise you, I can extol you, and you will add a flesh in your mind. Is that right? Now that is not the essential bliss. That's a pseudo bliss. You feel happy. माझा अहंकार सुखावला, happiness. माझा अहंकार दुखावला, sadness. Your eye got hurt, sadness. But I can give you a kind of delight by praising you, extolling you, out of proportions. I go out of proportion and I praise you. You feel added flesh in your eye. But that's not essential. If you want essential bliss, it must be set aside. So your bliss is only not in the gravity of I. It should be, you have to escape the gravity of pronoun I. Then only you have that bliss, essential bliss. So that's another connotation of meditation, to be not in your pronoun I, not to be in the gravity of pronoun I. Keep the pronoun I at a distance, out of the magnetic field, then that is dhyana. Anyway, much can be said. The more the said, less is understood. So we'll stop here. Okay? So let's go for the prayers. Close your eyes. Hold your palms. Vaignanika shikshakatve kalakara asanechuyaha योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञस् तं वन्दे सुन्दरं गुरुं योगवृक्षो लोकेऽस्मिन् वर्धितो यस्य प्रेरणया योगाचार्याय गुरवे सुन्दराय नमो नमः. Thank you very much. Diametrically opposite. That's not the case. There are two kinds of loves and two kinds of fears. Love with fear. If you love someone, you start having fear about that person, wellness of that person. So love without fear, love with fear, fear with love. Sometimes you have to love a person out of fear. So there are two kinds of loves and two kinds of fears. One is love with fear and fear with love. So this is worth pondering over, as I said last time. What kind of fear is a positive fear? What kind of fear is negative fear? You know about these positive and negative fears. But in relation to relationship between the love and fear is also to be taken, it should be considered. Sometimes you love, and if you love, you have fear about that. I might lose it, or something might happen unto the thing I love, person I love. So there is a fear about whatever you love. So love with fear and fear with love. And see the dynamics of life, how much these two factors are influencing your life. So if you will have to love someone because of fear, out of fear, that means it's a pseudo love. You have to show that you love. If you show that you don't love, then you have a hell of a time with that person. So that you know which is superior, which is inferior. So these two factors are working in our life. Sometimes we fear out of love and sometimes we love out of fear. How often we have pure love and how often we have pure fear. The fear is also there because we love something and someone. And the love has also a touch of taint of fear. So find out, can you have love where there is no fear at all? And the fear where there is no love factor at all? So that's why I said it's worth pondering over. Understand the dynamics of life and see various situations in life. How the love and fear, whether they come in some sort of joint venture, are they related to each other?